Hey, everybody, welcome back to It's Not Just You, the place where we answer burning questions from women in tech and other male-dominated industries. I'm Gretchen DeKnikker, and today we are going to cover two questions. How do I prioritize when I have people-pleasing tendencies? And the second is, help. I joined an early hyper-growth startup that has squeezed all of my energy and time for self-care out of me. So been there with both of these, and we're going to get into it. So first, why are we here? Well, this whole series is created to address the four things that get in our way, particularly for people socialized as women: people-pleasing, self-doubt, and indecision, negative self-talk, and perfectionism. And so today we're going to dive into perfectionism and people-pleasing, but if you check out the whole series, which is available on YouTube, if you ever want to go, if you're watching on the live stream or watching live and wondering where these go, they go live on YouTube, so you can go find them there. So the goal is just to give candid answers to questions that come up. I've spoken to like 2,500 women over the past couple of years, and these are the questions that come up most often. And so what I want to do is I'm going to break them down. Here's how your socialization, particularly for people socialized as women, hits your nervous system. And here's why you people please. Here's why you do the negative self-talk and indecision and self-doubt and perfectionism. Like, it's a predictable path. And so the whole idea is just to shine a light on how this is happening so that we can go to the source of the problem. And if it's creating outcomes that we don't like, we can change it. Couple quick housekeeping things. We've got a masterclass coming up on the 8th of November. Called No More Playing Small, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Get What You Deserve. So I like this one. So we're going to really dive into self-doubt and confidence, and that's going to be amazing. Ashley said, check, 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 check. Yeah, with the people-pleasing self-doubt. I'm sure that's what that's response to. Yeah. And so we're going to dive deep, deep, deep. We'll spend, it's about 25 minutes of content. We'll keep it super interactive, but I will always give you like tips that you can take away from each of my masterclasses that are super, super simple to do, that won't add extra time in your day, but will really help you start to shift your mindset so you can feel more confident, so you don't go into perfectionist burnout, so that you can turn down the volume on that really harsh inner critic. So that's what happens in the monthly masterclasses. So definitely join us for that one. All right. So did I miss anything else? Yeah. And then I love a lively chat, which most of y'all have been here before, so you know that. So just whatever you have to add in, I love it. It makes it really fun for me. So drop your comments and your questions and everything else in the chat. Oh, and if you're on the live stream and you want to come play with us, wherever that is, join through that Zoom link and come play with us here. Okay. So question one, how do I prioritize when I have people-pleasing tendencies? All right, so we've already identified what nervous system response in, right? We're in a fawn response, which is people-pleasing. So what's happening here is that everyone else is probably happy, but you forgot about yourself, right? You say yes to avoid conflict or disappointment in other people, and you prioritize everybody else's needs above your own, which can often leave you like drained, frustrated, and sometimes a little bit resentful of all of the people who are taking and depleting all of your time. And it's often driven by thoughts like, if I don't do this, they'll be mad at me, or I need to keep the peace, right? Feeling responsible for other people's feelings. But this is a self-sabotaging cycle that keeps you small and silent and stuck, all in the name of like getting that approval. So what's going on with our socialization? Why is our nervous system so triggered? So there is one small part that's actually evolutionary biology, right? There was a time in human history where if people didn't like you and you were kicked out of the community or the tribe, you were going to freeze to death, starve to death, or get eaten by a lion or a bear. It was not going to be a good end. And so part of that is hard coded in that, like, we want to fit in, we want to be part of the group. And that is one part of it, but it's not the part that's driving like this extreme people-pleasing behavior. What's driving it often is that validation, particularly for people socialized as women, comes from service of others. You get an answer to the question, am I doing this right? Am I good? And A secondary thing that is coming into play here is that around the age of 4 or 5, in girl social groups, we start seeing cooperation over competition being valued. And in boy social groups, you start seeing the alpha and the competition. So there's a lot of like micro failures if you think about it, right? Like if you're competing to see who's going to be the alpha, only one's going to win and everybody else is going to lose each time, right? And it builds an emotional resilience for failure that you don't see in girl social groups. Instead, we're trained to keep the peace, right? Like that's how the dynamics in these social groups start around the age of 4 or 5. So all of those things are driving this. They're driving the need to people please. So what are the feelings that are coming up because of these beliefs? Well, there's a ton of fear, right? There's a fear of someone else's discomfort. There's a fear of there's a fear of the guilt or regret or shame you're going to feel if someone else doesn't approve. There's a fear of letting people down, which could really be driving this. Like when you're talking about a hyper growth startup, right? Like everyone's working so hard that you feel like you're not pulling your weight. They're all working so hard. I can't be the one who has boundaries, right? That's part of what's driving this. And then there's an anxiety of being spread too thin, right? There's a ton of anxiety that's going to come around that once you've said yes, when you should have said no a couple of times. And then again, that resentment, right, is another thing we're going to feel because we start resenting the people who are putting these demands on our time, even though often the people that we're going to resent the most are the ones that we love the most and actually want to be doing these things for. It's just that they have so many needs, particularly if you have small humans in your house, right? So what happens? Well, of course we say yes when we mean no, if our validation comes from service of others. Of course we do. Of course, we overcommit when we prioritize other people's comforts and needs above our own, right? Of course we do. That's where we get our validation. Of course, we struggle to prioritize when we're afraid of letting someone down, right? Which is the thing that's coming up here. Oh, I mixed up the questions on the Harper Growth Startup. We'll come back to that one. But the prioritizing, right, when we're afraid of letting anyone down. This is why there's a struggle to prioritize, because you want to make everyone happy. You also feel responsible for their comfort. And I will make the argument that they are responsible for their own comfort and you are responsible for your comfort, and you need to attend to you just as they need to attend to themselves. Everyone is their own responsibility, their level of comfort. So what happens when we do these very predictable, very understandable things? Ashley says, I always love your of course sentences, just so validating, and it's helpful to connect the dots. Yeah, like, because otherwise we'll tell ourselves that we're doing something wrong, that like, oh, it's like, that's why this is called It's Not Just You, because we blame ourselves for something that's a really predictable, right? If you are socialized in this way, your nervous system's going to react in this way. And of course, you're going to do these things, right? But we blame ourselves. We think, oh, it's just me. I don't know why I can't get it together, right? Like those kind of things that we tell ourselves because we think it's some problem that we have, that we created, that we're responsible for fixing, right? Which is not the case. Okay, so what happens when we do these things? When we do this very predictable behavior, we overcommit and let people down anyway, right? That horrible feeling where you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have said yes to that, and now I'm going to fail at everything, right? And then we shame ourselves for that. You've chronically undermet needs from the stress and anxiety, and then you feel shame for being stressed out about it, and shame yourself for not being perfect. We resent the people we care about the most, which we covered already. But the worst part about people pleasing, well, one, with people pleasing, no one gets to really, like, they don't like you. Like your biggest fear is not being liked, but no one likes you now because they don't know you. They like the version of you that does things for them. And so you're robbing people of the opportunity to love who you actually are, right? This person that sometimes says yes and sometimes has boundaries, right? This person that prioritizes themselves, like they don't get the chance to love that. And so it's really strange, right? That our thing of like I need everybody to like me. I need everyone to approve of me, but they're not liking and approving you. They're liking and approving the version of you that you're giving to them. And who wouldn't like a person who like does everything and is super agreeable, right? So my pitch on that, but the worst part about the people pleasing is that we never get to be a main character in our own narrative, right? We're just like a supporting character in everyone else's narrative, but we never get into our main character energy and era, which I think is the worst part about people pleasing. Okay, so what do we do about it? So one way to think about how do I prioritize is if I knew for sure that everyone's needs would be taken care of and no one would be mad at me, what would I do? Right? It can be more challenging in your professional life, but it is a great question in your personal life, right? If I knew that everything that I'm worried about, that someone's going to be mad at me, that I'm going to do it wrong, that someone's going to be uncomfortable, right? If none of those things, then what would I choose, right? If we could just guarantee for sure, right? And that'll help you understand what's most important to you. In the workplace, I think you need to add an extra layer to it. So really get clear, like, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I don't want to tell them no. I'm doing this because I'll be uncomfortable if they're annoyed with me that I didn't want to do this thing, right? What's the thing is for whose benefit, right? So we can get a little lost and make an argument like, oh, this is for the company's benefit or this is for the team's benefit or whatever, but like it's not entirely true, right? And when we're in the workplace, we really have to think of like what's promotable work and what's non-promotable work, right? And everyone has to do some level of non-promotable work in their jobs. But like if it's constantly going to you because you're the person who says yes, all you're going to get is more of that. And so you just need to make sure, is this benefiting me and the future that I see for myself in my career? And that will help you prioritize a little bit more too. And then thinking about what will I get if I do this? If I take on this project that's outside of the scope of what I normally do, what will I get? Beyond validation and approval, because we're never going to get enough of that will offset the like loss of the things that will get us to where we want to go in our career. So what we want to do is we want to build that emotional resilience that we didn't get because we were in the girl social groups where, and these are broad generalizations, but cooperation was valued over competition. And so we don't get to look inward for the answer. Am I doing it right? Am I doing a good job? Right. And what we want to do is we want to build that skill of listening to ourselves rather than trying to use everyone else as our validation vending machines and giving us our validation cookies, right, to tell us that we're doing it right. So one way to really start building that emotional resilience, and I give you all this idea all the time, but it's important and it's a really good one, is do a dare of the day. So the way you can build emotional resilience is to do things that scare you every day, low stakes things, but they feel terrifying, right? For me, terrifying would be sending back a meal in a restaurant. I will eat the wrong thing. I will eat something I hate. Like, I will probably try to eat a normal amount of it so that the waitress doesn't ask like, why didn't you like this, right? There's some level of discomfort in that for me, right? You can ride an escalator backwards. You can sit and face everyone on the subway, like whatever it is, but find things that scare you that are very low stakes. Ask your barista for a free cup of coffee, low stakes things, but try to do them every day and challenge yourself to push through that fright and then get to the other side and be like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Because then when the higher stakes things happen, when you have to push through that to say no to someone and hold space for that they're not going to like your no, then you've started building up that skill. Okay. Great. All right. So that was question one. Question two. Help. I joined a hypergrowth startup that has squeezed all of my energy and time for self-care out of me. All right. So we're going to do what we always do. Here's what's going on with your nervous system. Here's how your socialization is potentially triggering that response. And then, well, here's what's going on. Here's why you do it. And then here's what we can do instead. So that's our path. So two things are going on when you are not taking care of yourself. There's a little bit of people pleasing, or maybe a lot, right? And that's the fawn response. And then there's perfectionism, and that's the flight response. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid the failure, right? If it's not perfect, then it can't get done at all. And we're constantly chasing this ideal that doesn't exist, what my mentor calls perfectionist fantasies. And then fear can also lead to the fear of like doing it wrong, can lead to a freeze response where you're either procrastinating because you're trying to avoid it, or you're in a state of paralysis. Like you can't move forward because if you can't see every step and you know you can't do it perfectly, then you don't want to do it at all. Like this was me for most of my life and still plenty of the time now. So what's going on with our socialization that's triggering this? Well, one, there's no validation cookies for self-care. None. No one praises you for that. No one says good job. Like you could do a post on Instagram and a couple people would give you like a whatever, oh, good job, like taking care of yourself. But like there's no real validation vending machine that you can go to consistently that will tell you, oh, self-care, good job on you today. You can feel like a really good person, right? And this is because from a young age, girls are taught to be good and polite and pleasing and to color inside the lines, follow the rules, don't rock the boat, right? And we're told that our worth comes from being likable and agreeable, right? This is what we get praised for. So we're praised for being good girls who are quiet and well behaved and don't like cause problems, right? And what happens is we internalize the messages that mistakes are failures, right? Because we're always looking to be a good whatever, right? And we're so afraid that if we're not perfect, that we'll lose the approval and we'll be seen as less capable. So of course, we're going to like care what other people think in this hypergrowth startup. And this is, I got a little lost in the first question, but this is what I was coming back to, is that we're going to be worried in a hypergrowth startup that everyone else is working hard and I can't not work hard. And so the way that I get more time in my day is to not take care of any of my own needs. So what are the feelings that are driving this? There's so much fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of not being enough, right? Worrying that if you don't get it right, something really bad will happen, like rejection, disapproval, or judgment, right? This is the thing that I would guess, certainly what would drive me in a hypergrowth startup would be this idea that like everyone's going to see that I'm not working as hard as they are, right? Even if like I know now going like a few years ago when I went back into an early stage startup, it was like I finally had the confidence and sort of the self-assuredness to be like, I know what I can get done in this amount of time and I'm not available in those other hours. But I also was in a senior executive role where I could draw those lines and like clearly state, like, if you want me here, there will not be all of this. I'm doing calls at 8 p.m. and on Sunday night, right? Like that's not happening. Get your shit together and get it done during the week, right? But that was like partially like an earned thing and partially like my own self-assuredness of knowing that like what I had to contribute and that I was able, particularly in this company, to work smarter. I didn't have to work as hard because I could work much smarter because I had a lot more experience than most of the people working there. So in lieu of that, right, we've got other feelings that are going on. So you worry if you don't get it right, that this will happen, right? Anxiety from the overthinking and the pressure to meet impossible standards. You've got some guilt and shame in there, right? Like if I screw this up, and then some frustration and resentment again, right? The same with people pleasing, that this will start building up of like, I missed that family event because I couldn't fly out on a Friday because we had this stupid blah, blah, blah thing, right? Like the things you start building that frustration and resentment because you're not getting that recharge time. And so ultimately you're going to end up exhausted and on the verge of burnout, which is where I was in 2017, where you're mentally and emotionally exhausted and possibly physically exhausted too, because that strive for perfection leaves you drained. And then that drives, in turn, you're going to feel like you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and like drawing from like a dry well, which is where I was when I burned out and when I walked away at the height of my career. So, but that, all of that, the fear and everything else is what's driving you to do it. And then the fear of being left out, right? Back to that evolutionary biology sort of element that I don't know if we were talking about this one or the other one, where it's hard coded into us that if we were left out of the tribe, right, that we would freeze to death, starve to death, or get eaten by a lion, right? So there is that thing that of like, oh, well, maybe I would be fired, or maybe no one will want to work with me anymore. Maybe it'll be harder to get things done if I don't keep giving more than I actually have. So Ashley asks, how do we train our nervous system to not believe mistake equals failure? Yeah, that's a great question. So and you see this as a gender difference too, of like, there's a difference between like a mistake happened and one person's going to believe I'm a failure and the other one's going to be, I tried something that failed. Right. So there's like, we don't have to take it on as an evaluation of our skill or ability or future potential, right? It's just, I tried a thing, it didn't work. Here's what I learned. I'm going to go try it again, right? But we have to separate. Like, I can be a person who makes mistakes and still be amazing at my job, right? You can use an and statement there, right? I can get fired and still be a really great employee, right? For a different company, right? Like, you can put some and statements in there, like, because it's not a verdict. It's not a one time, like, man, you screwed up that one thing, it's all over for you, right? It's not like you were convicted of murder and you're being sent away for whatever amount of time, right? It's like, I screwed up and we missed this deadline, or I screwed up and I felt really embarrassed in this meeting because I gave the wrong answer, like whatever it is. But like, try to separate the action from the person, and that will really take down the stakes on it. Like, I'm a person who makes mistakes every day, right? If you just accept that and try to get out of that perfectionist, like running around, like trying to make it all perfect and try to never, ever, ever make this mistake again. If you just accept that mistakes will happen all the time as a fact, I'm a person who makes a lot of mistakes, right? That will change the frame. Instead of, I'm a person who's always trying not to make any mistakes, then you're always going to fail. You're going to think you're a failure, right? So hopefully that answers. Let me know. Okay, so what is driving this, right? Like, what are the predictable behaviors? Well, of course, we're worried what our colleagues will think if we're not grinding it out nights and weekends. Of course we are, right? There's a bunch of reasons for that. Of course, we over deliver, over prepare, and over apologize anything to avoid that criticism. Of course, we're going to do that because that's how we get our validation cookies, right? Of course, we're going to use perfectionism as shield to protect us from judgment, right? That exactly the question that Ashley just asked, right? Because otherwise we don't get our cookies, right? And of course, we beat ourselves up when we can't distinguish the difference between a mistake and a failure, right? Very rarely do we like epically fail, right? But we make a lot of mistakes. And of course, we prioritize our work over our health because there are no validation cookies for self-care. Like, all this makes total sense. So what happens when we do this, though? What happens when we do this very predictable set of things? It ends up keeping us small and stuck and silenced, which sucks. The fear of falling short keeps us from taking risks and speaking up and showing up as our authentic, messy selves, right? But if we can take it, if you can distinguish between a mistake and a failure and the thing that happened and the person who did the thing, right? Then you get a lot more freedom there. And we're so worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing that we rob the world and ourselves of our own brilliance. And we're so worried about needing to know every step, because if we don't know every step, that it's all going to go perfectly, then we don't want to take any steps because any step might lead us to failure, right? But then we just get stuck at the starting line and we never try anything and we never go anywhere. And that's the part I hate the most about perfectionism. And that's the part that, like, we just really want to blow up as much as possible. Okay. So what are our tips to try? So we're going to cancel the woulda triplets, the shoulda, coulda, and woulda, right? These are the things that are creating shame. So in this situation, I should have logged on for that meeting. I could have done this on Sunday, and now I'm regretting it on Tuesday because I don't feel prepared enough, or like I didn't get the thing to the person in time, right? If only I would have done more, right? These are the things that are driving it. So stop using these judging words because they create shame, and shame will not get you anywhere. And so think about like how you can gas yourself up instead of like having your inner bully following you around, shoulding, coulding, and woulding all over yourself. Have your inner Lizzo or your inner like whomever to go in and gas you up and be like, you got this, right? You are valued, you are worthy, you are loved. I know this. I know you can do this. I believe in you, right? That's a very different energy that's going to like get you going in a different way. And then the other thing is what I was talking about with the answer to Ashley's question also earlier is using and statements. So I can make a huge mistake and be amazing at my job. I can yell at my kids and be a loving, supportive parent, right? I can schedule my free time first and be a top performer. And this is the one I really suggest for this particular question is scheduling your free time first. It's non-negotiable time. Taking care of you is truly non-negotiable because if you don't, you will burn out. You will do what I did. You will walk away, hopefully not to the extreme. Like I walked away at the height of my career, like from a job I was amazing at that like was just getting good at a company that I built from the ground up. Like it sucked to walk away from that. But if I'd learned that like my free time, my self-care time was non-negotiable, this was always going to happen, and I made that commitment to myself, it would have been a very different thing. I wouldn't have got to that point. Like I might have still left because it was a super stressful job, but I wouldn't have left in like this burnout, like flame out blaze of glory. All right. So, or blaze of not glory, really. All right. So we're going to hop into the networking. So if y'all are on the live stream and you want to network, then y'all should come over here.